Okay, now that we've defined polymers and monomers, let's get into some of these major macromolecules that are vital to life. All right, you have all of these in your body. You've talked and discussed about them before, I'm sure, in other classes. But this lesson is going to be focused in on carbohydrates and lipids. You want to make sure that you can describe their structure, their function, spot pictures of them, that sort of thing. So, carbohydrates. In our bodies, their function is energy, all right? So we're talking glucose, sucrose, fructose, all right? Glucose is the major one that our bodies make use of most efficiently, all right? So carbohydrates, when they are polymers, are what we call polysaccharides, all right? And then the single repeating units, like your glucose, is called a monosaccharide, all right? So that'd be, like starch would be the polysaccharide, and then our bodies will break it up into individual glucoses so that we can turn it into energy. So here's some structures, all right? They are often hexagonal in shape. They may also be pentagon shaped. All right, and they have lots of OH groups. What are those called? Lots of alcohols on them. All right, the next major macromolecule you want to be familiar with are your fats and oils, which are scientifically called lipids. All right, so a unique trait to lipids is they are all insoluble in water. All right, you know this. If you try to combine oil and water, they form layers. The function will depend on the type of lipid we're talking about. So triglycerides are what sugars get turned into when we don't use them. That's, fat on our bodies. Their primary purpose is to store energy. All right, and their general structure is going to be like this picture here. There's a glycerol group, which is this blue part in the middle. And then long fatty acid chains. All right, these are truncated ones in this picture. Really, these are going to go very, very, very long. All right, and these points represent a CH group, right? So, and if it's in the middle, it's CH2. The one at the very, very end will be CH3. All right, so lots and lots of carbons and hydrogens, and that's what makes them so insoluble. Another thing to know about triglycerides, all right, if you've heard of the term saturated or unsaturated fats before, this is the chemistry behind those names, all right? So a saturated fat has every single carbon in the fatty acid tails single bonded, all right? So it's saturated, has the maximum number of hydrogens available. An unsaturated fat has some of those hydrogens removed and double bonds instead. All right, and what that does, which is depicted really well in this picture, it causes a kink or a bend in the tail. All right, so saturated means that it's full of hydrogens and it's perfectly straight. Unsaturated means that there's some hydrogens missing, which then forms a double bond, and that puts a kink or a bend into the fatty acid tail. The next kind of fat you want to be familiar with is a phospholipid. You might remember this from biology class and cell membranes. All right, so they are similar to our triglycerides. They have hydrophobic fatty acid tails, but they only have 2 tails. And then they're, instead of attached to the glycerol in place of the 3rd tail, is this really polar head. So you have a very distinctly polar end and a very distinctly nonpolar end. So 2 fatty acid tails and a phosphate head, plus that glycerol group. The next lipid you want to be familiar with is steroid. All right. Yes, this is the the evil steroids of drug abuse and sports abuse and things like that, but also there are good steroids. There are normal steroids that we have to have in our bodies just to function. Cholesterol is a steroid. The hormones that make us male and female, testosterone and estrogen, those are steroids. Cortisol, which is related to stress response, is a steroid. All right, so steroids have tails, but they aren't nearly as long as the fatty acid tails of triglycerides or phospholipids. And then they have these ring structures. All right, so it's kind of like what's attached to the ring is what makes it the different kind of steroid. Now, one last type of lipid you want to be familiar with are waxes. So waxes do occur naturally. They form waterproof layers on the outside of things like fruits and leaves. And their structure is, there's a fatty acid section, so a long tail, attached via an ester to an alcohol section. All right, so there's your examples and structures and functions of carbohydrates and lipids. Definitely have some notes on these. This isn't something that's going to be super easy to memorize. So if you need to, rewind again, get everything that was bolded and colored, make sure you write that stuff down.